Hello and good morning. Thanks so much for joining me here on Wave Now. I'm Myra Ansari. We have made it to Wednesday. We are going live right now to Jefferson County Public Schools, where they're giving us an update on the new app that they want parents to use to track buses and the heat that we're experiencing.
We have a few other things we want to update on as well. Obviously, the app for parents is now live, so they know the location of their child's bus, which I think is a huge improvement for us in communication with our families. And then we also want to update on heat and athletics for the rest of the week, because we know that is an important issue as well. First and foremost, I want to start by saying that I am pleased with the effort that has been put forward over the past really 2 weeks. I can't say enough. It seems like it's been months, but the past 2 weeks has been just an incredible amount of work put in to make sure that we correct the errors that we had. I guess that was 2 weeks ago today. And so just 14 consecutive days of hard work, making sure that we get to a point where we get our kids home in a timely manner, and obviously to school. I do want to say I'm pleased with where we are right now. So last night we reported our last student was dropped off at 7:13 p.m. I do want to put that in a little bit of context. Last year, 1 year ago, right from this time, the third day of school, our last compound cleared, our last student was dropped off at 6:42 p.m. Taking that our school day is now 35 minutes longer, we actually improved on the amount of time it was to get children home over last year. So I do want to put that in context. I think that's important because we have worked so hard over the past 2 weeks to make sure we implement things that are more efficient for our students getting home, and technologies that are going to help us, and we've done that. I can't say enough about the work that's been put in. It has really been all hands on deck. And once again, I want to say this, we are working on 400 less bus routes approximately than we did 7-8 years ago. It's even hard to overstate how difficult that is when we look at the context of the national problem. If you haven't seen, in Chicago public schools, right now the only students that are getting transportation, Monday was their first day of school, the only students that are getting guaranteed transportation are those that are guaranteed by law, meaning special education students and students who qualify for homeless services. Those are the only students. There are about 1,300 bus drivers short in Chicago public schools. So obviously this is an issue that we're going to continue to grapple with nationally, and it's a very difficult one. But I do want to thank the team. I mean, it has been inspirational to me to see the team effort that has been put in. First of all, I have to say our bus drivers have been heroes. Thank you so much, bus drivers, for sticking with this. We continue to make these routes more efficient. We'll be in the process very shortly we have some stops, many stops. This happens every year where students are not using those stops, so we'll drop them in the next 48 hours, and so they will no longer be stops and will become much more efficient in our routes. So we continue to believe that time that we are dropping off students will become more efficient and earlier in the evening. But our bus drivers have truly been heroes, sticking with us. We're working hard to support them, and I can't thank you enough, bus drivers, for all that you have done. I go over to CB Young and see the amount of employees that have stepped up and said, let me help. From 485 Ride, if we go in that room, there's 40 to 50 people that have stepped up and said, we will work 485 Ride after my work hours to help and make sure that we can communicate with families. To our leadership team who has been there for 14 consecutive days, and I mean, this is yes, operations and transportation, but every division has been a part of this. To our staff who are riding on buses to help some of our bus drivers, to our folks that are taking vans to make sure when a student misses their stop or a parent is not at that stop, we can issue a van out to make sure that the bus continues on and we get that child home safely. So it has just been a great team effort. Very proud of all of the work that we've done. I do want to say this, we still have a lot of work to do. So this is not a job that is complete at this time. We still have a whole lot of work to do. We've made a lot of short-term fixes. We're going to continue to work on these efficiencies long-term throughout August and even into September to make sure that we have the most efficient transportation system that we can possibly have. And I will appreciate our compound coordinators and our bus drivers for working to help us figure out how we can make those improvements. We're going to continue to do that. So I know you've heard a lot from me here over the past couple of weeks. I want to make sure that we have some other voices involved in this work. And at this time, I'd like to bring up our Chief Operations Officer, Chris Perkins.
Thank you, Dr. Polio, and good morning. As Dr. Polio has communicated previously, I want to extend my personal apologies as well for the disruption and inconveniences caused by poor implementation of a new transportation plan. We have been working around the clock to address that and make improvements to those systems. I want to share a few updates on where we are and where we're going in the near future with some short-term measures that we put into place to address some of the immediate challenges. So we've reviewed our routes. We continue to do that. We're making informed revisions in partnership with our bus drivers and our bus compound coordinators to make those necessary changes to shorten many of our longest routes. That was kind of one of the top priorities, is the longer routes for both bus drivers and students. Our bus drivers are getting more familiar with the routes at the same time. Our students are getting more familiar with their bus stops and their buses, and we're making progress on several fronts. Just from last Friday night, so in 3 days, we've reduced our late drop-off time by 30 minutes. That's a good indicator of improvements to the system. We'll continue working on that. That also serves as a good metric to help us make informed decisions on additional changes that need to be made. We're continuing to analyze, make revisions to the routes, as I mentioned. Additionally, as we continue to add or drop stops, those impact the routes as well. So we will be making some concurrent decisions on those to improve efficiencies. We're committed to reducing our times even further. We're working to make improvements to ensure all kids get home in a reasonable hour. Ultimately, that's what we want, safe and efficient transportation. As Dr. Polio said, we're working on this part of a long-term solution. Our priorities were, one, to get students back into school as quickly as possible, two, to look at some short-term immediate interventions that we could provide to improve our efficiencies, and then what are some systemic changes we can be making as well to improve upon our system holistically. We reduced the number of students who've not been assigned to stop. We continue working through that. It's important to understand, we have students that enroll, transfer, move to different schools, or have changes in their transportation circumstances every day throughout the year. So adding stops is something we will continue to do throughout the year. That's normal. So we continue addressing the number of stops and students who are getting to and from school on buses to make sure that they've got clear communication on where their bus stops are. We've also worked to address internal and external communication from the operational and transportation standpoint. We've substantially increased the number of customer service representatives we have answering calls in 485 RIDE. That number is almost quadrupled. So when parents call now, they're able to get through on the line and actually talk to a person to get assistance with resolving issues they may have with a bus stop or a bus route. We've also kind of restructured our command structure and support systems that we have in place to really pinpoint specific support to not just our buses, but our compounds that are kind of geographically scattered throughout the county as well. That's enabled us to be able to deploy available resources to be able to provide support for students that maybe missed a bus or got off at the wrong stop. As you know, we've got buses as well as some vans and fleet vehicles on the road. We've got additional staff volunteering to pick up students should they have missed their stop. As many of you know, Dr. Polio even volunteered to hop in a car and go pick some students up to help us out the other day. So it's really been a team effort. I want to thank our drivers. I hope our community continues to show them appreciation. Again, they have taken on an entirely new transportation system. They've done that with a lot of commitment and persistence, and it's just a testament to the passion with which they do their jobs every day to make sure our students are getting to school safely. Again, we've made progress. I don't want to minimize the challenges we have in front of us. We are executing a plan that still transports over 60,000 students to school and home every day to over 150 campuses, but we're doing it with 40% fewer drivers. And so that's a challenge, and we ask for your understanding that we are working that problem. And part of that was overhauling our system. We'll continue making revisions to that to address those driver shortages as well. And at this time, I'll introduce Dr. April Brooks, our Director of Athletics.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Student safety is a priority in athletics, and so we put in several precautions in place to make sure that our students are safe throughout the week due to the heat wave. And so one of the things we're doing with high school sports is that we have pushed them back on Thursday and Friday. They'll start after 7:30 p.m. so that we have an opportunity for the weather to cool down. And our younger students, middle school and elementary, we have canceled sports except for volleyball. They can practice and play in an air-conditioned gym. And so we want to make sure that kids are prepared for the heat as well. We're asking parents and guardians to make sure that they're hydrating and they're eating well as well. Our athletic directors, our trainers, and our coaches are prepared for the heat. They'll make sure that they have cold towels out there. There's also shaded areas as well where they can cool down. We have what's called cold immersion tubs for students if there are signs of heat illness. So they'll be looking for things like headaches, cramping, students vomiting, excessive sweating. We prepare for this in the summer through our coaches' clinics. So we just want to make sure that we have safety first. And so we've got all these things in place to ensure that. Thank you.
All right, so that's our update for today. Once again, pleased with the progress, but still have a lot of work to do. And so at this time, we'll take questions about any of the topics we discussed or the app that we will be, that is now released to parents.
Dr. Polio, when it comes to those stops that you were mentioning that are going to be dropped off of routes, we've heard from some parents who say that this week they've been driving their kids to school. Are you going to be communicating with families before dropping a route, or are they just being kind of dropped if
Well, a dropping of route will only be those that have had no students at those routes.
Or I'm sorry, a stop. Like say if
Yes, so a stop. It would be a stop that no student has been to that stop at any time. So yeah, we'll communicate that with families, but that's not something new. We do that every single year, where if a student's not at the stop, the first few days the bus driver has to continue to stop there, which adds time but after 4 or 5 days, if a student has not gotten on that stop, then we will eliminate that stop, same as we always do.
Will you guys be calling families though to ask, like, do you plan to bring your kid when things settle down?
Yeah, we'll communicate. I can't say exactly how we're going to do that, but we'll communicate with families.
There are some security concerns now that the app is rolled out. It seems like anyone with this code can have access to all JCPS buses. What would you say to parents who thought that they were only going to be able to access their child's bus?
Yeah, well, I'll say this. First of all, it's this app or an app like this is used in 80% of the large school districts in the United States. So this is not a first for us. We use the Lite because it does not track the route. So it only shows where the bus is at that current time. It doesn't say where it's going, it only shows where it is at that time. So no different than if a child had, on their cell phone, the parent could track where the child is. But, I think it's definitely something we are going to provide. We are providing some guidelines for our drivers and things like that. But, our stops are available online for every single bus nearly. So, someone could look and see when those stops are occurring too. So this only gives the current location of the bus. It does not say where it's heading after that.
Do you have an update or an average of the number of calls you're getting at the 485 RIDE number? And how do you anticipate that being impacted now that parents have access to this app?
I'm sure communications could give you some update on that. I know it just anecdotally from me being in the room or right there, it's greatly reduced over the past 2 to 3 days. And so staffing, we've been able to reduce the amount of staff in there and the time they're in there. I can't give the exact number, but it's much less.
I wanted to ask about you driving students home the other day. It's kind of come on to like a personal level for you, I feel like, on making sure kids get home safely. So if you want to talk about, I guess how you did that.
Yeah, I really didn't do that for any note. If we had wanted that to be out, I'm sure these folks would have taken pictures of me doing it. So my intention was not to have that out at all. I don't even know how that happened. My intention was just to pitch in. I'm over in the command center every afternoon. We had a couple of kids who the bus driver missed their bus stop. And by our protocol now, it's to drop them off at the school, the next school. So they were at Trundle Elementary School, and I said, they were looking around. I said, give me a car. I'll jump in and go get them. So nothing that anyone else hasn't done, just a normal part of what we're all doing right now, but happy to pitch in.
My question, can you hear me? Is for Chris Perkins. You mentioned there have been improvements as far as the transportation and the bus crisis that you apologize for, the poorly implemented plan. Can you identify what are some of the shortfalls that still exist and what your department is doing to address that?
So we're looking at some of those long routes, first of all, to see how can we shorten them. The longer the route, that typically means the later the drop off. Some of that can be diffused by moving students and stops to another bus that runs somewhere in a geographically proximal area. The other things we're looking at are some of the routes that may be crisscrossing that could be intercepted by another bus and switching students from one bus to another route. We're also looking at some of the locations. One of our depots we relocated this year, and we're running into some traffic problems. So just by simply relocating a depot, we can improve some of the efficiencies coming in and out of that, which kind of has a ripple effect for timing as well. Those are a few of the things.
My question is for Dr. Marty Polio. Wondering if you have an update for families on when daycare services might be available.
When daycare services, I'm sorry, I'm not following.
Early childhood after school.
Early childhood. We'll have some information out shortly on early childhood. We're using those buses right now. We want to make sure that we get as efficient as possible so that we can handle that load. But I don't have an update on the exact date right now, but we'll be having something out in the very near future on a start date. Also wanted to add to that question too about some of the shortcomings. It's important to reiterate again, folks, that we have reduced by 400 routes and provide the exact same services that we have always provided. We appreciate, I know that a lot of stops, parents have wanted stops either closer to their house or at a different location, but I want to reiterate, when you have 400 less drivers and routes than you did just a short time ago, 7 or 8 years ago, and provide the same services, there's going to be real challenges with that. And so these challenges will continue to the point where we're going to have to evaluate, do we continue to provide these services for every single family who chooses, and we provide transportation to nearly every family, no matter what school choice that they do. And there's very few districts who do that anymore.
Dr. Polio, you all have mentioned getting some help with from UPS when it comes to logistics. Where are things at with some of those meetings right now?
We have been in communication with UPS. They've helped us out a lot. I mean, right now, over the past 3 or 4 days, we have been hunkered down with the actual game, so to speak, itself. And so we're going to get back with them here very shortly. And work on they're going to help us with some of our long-term approaches to making it much more efficient.
We saw 7:13 as an arrival time yesterday, an improvement from the day before. Is there a specific time at which you all would say, we're good, this is what we are aiming for to get kids home every single day?
Yeah, so I want to say this, it's important to note. Last year, these times that we are arriving home, this is on par with prior years. So this is not, so when people say, 713 it is on par. When you are transporting 67,000 students, and many students are going through a depot from one side of town to the other to reach their school, that, there are going to be some inefficiencies in that model, but that's a family's choice to say, I want to go to a school outside of my community, and I want transportation, and we're providing that. But, when we look at even last year, the delays in transportation with double and triple runs, getting kids home well after 6:30 and even 7 on many nights was a common occurrence. And so our goal here in this new system is to make sure that we get to a point where times are very predictable for families. And so we can tell a family, this is when the drop-off time that we can provide is, based on the resources that we have. And if a family wants to take use that transportation, they can, or obviously, we would encourage them, if that's not something they can do, that they would use their own transportation. And so that's an important part of it. But when we look at, we want to be more efficient than last year. And so even with this new system, our goal is to get obviously before 7 o'clock. Our last student dropped off. We think we will get there. But with school ending 35 minutes later, we have to know that's on par for a 35-minute later finish. But definitely our goal is to get in the sixes before 7 o'clock.
And Dr. Polio, there are still some students who don't either have an AM or a PM route assigned to them. Has there been any update to that, or how many students are still in that situation, and when could families expect to have both of those routes
I think we
assigned?
fixed a great deal of those. I'm not saying it's 100% there, so I would encourage them to continue to call 485 RIDE so that we can take care of that. We still have people staffed on there that we can. I don't have the exact number, but I'm sure we can get that for you. Do you have a number? Okay.
Anybody else?
Sorry.
Dr. Polio, you mentioned that you all will further address the transportation plan come the fall break. It's kind of a two-part. Can you talk about what that will look like? Is it going to be a complete overhaul of the current system? And then is kind of the reality of the buses right now going to be that going forward until fall break?
A few things. First and foremost, we're going to see where we are efficiency-wise. And so we have improved our efficiency greater than I anticipated from where we were 2 weeks ago today. And so we still have some work to do on the AM runs. There's no doubt about it. We've got some work to do on the AM runs. We've got to eliminate these stops that are not being used. We got to see what our final time is. And then we have to speak with bus drivers too. We know that they are stretched thin to make these routes. And so we want to talk to them as well to see where we are. We do know a full overhaul would be a major challenge and would require us to go through a whole process again. We're committed to doing that if that's what we need, but if we can improve the efficiencies that we have in the current system to the point where we feel very comfortable, then we wouldn't do a complete overhaul, but we will continue to work significantly on efficiencies, and we will make a decision. Obviously, we have some folks working on that complete overhaul, but we're going to have to make a decision in the next few weeks at that break if we're at a point where we need to do a complete overhaul or if we just need to keep improving efficiencies in our current system. So I can't say exactly what's going to happen with that, but we're working on both right now.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
All right, thank you so much for staying with me here on this stream, bringing you live information from Jefferson County Public Schools about their transportation plan and, of course, how to deal with this extreme heat that we are under. Some takeaways, they are reviewing their routes. Of course, they're trying to shorten the long routes, and they've also they're going to eliminate pickup spots, drop the spots. There we go. If I can get it out there, drop the spots that are not being used. They said this is something that they do every year. So also the increase in number of people staffing 485 RIDE to help parents out. So they said that their times are getting better. Their goal is to have kids home by 7 o'clock. So that's what the district is aiming for. So they talked about the later start times, which also pushes back the drop-off times, something for parents to keep in mind. With this extreme heat, they're telling folks to keep your kids hydrated. They've adjusted practice schedules for athletics, canceled those as well for the younger kids. So if you have not, I'd advise you to check out Wave News reporter David Ochoa's story from last night. He kind of walked us through how to use that Edulog Parent Portal Lite app. If you feel like you need some help navigating it, he did a really good job of showing you how to put your information in, finding the bus route. So it's super easy to use, and he walked you through all of that. It's on our website, wave3.com. Just look for David Ochoa's story on how to use that app that tracks your child's bus. So that is very helpful. Wave News reporter Kennedy Hayes is working on this story today, so she's going to have much more coming up for you on Wave News at 5 and 6 tonight. I'm Myra Ansari. I hope you have a great day.